Hello, everyone, and welcome to not just another episode of Lords of Limited. We've got a very special guest on the episode this week. We've broken our hashtag no more guests policy to bring on someone from Wizards of the Coast. My name is Ben Warney. Joining me on the line, as always, Mr. Ethan Wild Ride Sachs, and a person we're going to introduce momentarily, Ben Weitz, guest from WotC, who is the lead limited developer for Tarkir Dragonstorm. We're going to pick his brain a little bit about the design.
Yeah, I was trying to think back to when we had our last guest on, and I think it was basically exactly a year ago when we chatted with Andrew Cuneo during Outlaws of Thunder Junction. And one of the things that we'll talk about with Ben, he'll mention that because again, it's hard to not talk about when you talk about Tarkir or Dragonstorm, it's hard to not talk about Cons of Tarkir as well. He mentioned the KTK Pro Tour, and I was like, oh yeah. And I think our first guest was the winner of the KTK Pro Tour, which was Ari Lax. So it's all very symbiotically coming together. But a really fantastic conversation coming up for you folks with Ben Weitz.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible. Really enjoyed talking to him.
We won't do too much preamble here, but we probably should, as we are a limited Magic podcast, check in about what's going on with the format for you this week. Have you been drafting? Have you been loving it? Have you been discovering things?
Savagely crushing this week. Once I hit my stride, I have been on an absolute heater. I think I've trophied
Didn't you
my
say
last.
you're like I think I've spent more time in like silver than I did in platinum and diamond.
Oh, for sure. Finally hit Mythic. It's been a long time since I played enough Best of One to hit Mythic. Hit Mythic, ended top 250. Yeah, I think I've trophied my last 5 or 6 in a row.
Oh my god!
I'm dialed in on this format. It took lots of losing, but I am whatever. Iron forged by the fire, or whatever the analogy is, a phoenix rebirth. I don't know. I am here and I am dialed in on Tarkir Dragonstorm. And I think the more I play, the more I love and appreciate the format. you'll hear me sheepishly admit to Ben momentarily that I hope he didn't listen to our first episode, because I was not a happy camper the first week of this format.
Yeah. I like slipped a little bit, which you will not be surprised to hear. I'm sure our listeners will not either. That like all I want to do is the weird off meta
Tier 2
stuff.
decks.
I'm just like, how can I make this 12th pick Delta Bloodflies work, or all, stuff that I'm just like, I should not be doing that. I should be drafting responsibly. I should be drafting something good. I'll mention this deck in the chat with Ben in a little bit, but drafted this really cool Gruul deck yesterday. Definitely should have been in Jeskai. Like, got a couple of I think it's the Jeskai Shrinekeeper is the uncommon dragon. A couple of those mid to late in pack one, but I was already on this Gruul 4 power path. But like, that's the real hard push pull for me of like, I feel like I do know how to like read what's happening at the table, but do I have the willpower to resist the sort of tier 2, the off meta, off script decks?
It's going to pay off when the Arena Open comes around, which we should let people know is not this coming weekend, but 2 weekends out. There's an Arena Open. It'll be the weekend of Saturday, May 17th, Sunday, May 18th.
Yes, thank you for that shout. That's good to let people know about. So maybe we'll have some high stakes draft logs to review at that time, though. Maybe we have to do 50 takes then. I forget how the mapping works out for how the sets are coming out. But anyway, let's do a little housekeeping and then dive into our interview with Ben Weitz. We are powered by the Patreon. Patreon.com/Lords of Limited is where folks can go to give back to the show if they so choose. We got a lot of great perks over at the Patreon page too that we want to shout out. Is one, access to our Discord, which is just an excellent. I really do feel like I've never engaged with it more than I have than during this set. And it's been really, really enjoyable getting to not only ask some feedback of folks, but get to give feedback and be on a fly on the wall for some conversations. But the Discord is just an excellent community, 24/7 limited tech support for whatever you need, but also just a great place to be able to chat with people about, hey, I want to talk about this card, or hey, I'm watching coverage or whatever. It's just awesome to be able to have a go-to spot to talk to people about Magic. And you also get access to our podcast feed via the Patreon, where you not only get access to this episode a day early ad-free, but get access to our weekly bonus mini episode of Lords Unlimited that drops every Thursday. So if you want to check that out, if you want to do a little free week trial of that, the Patreon is the place for you. And we want to shout out our new patrons the first week that they join. So this week we're welcoming Philippe, Corey, Scott, Chris, Lowell, and Borbar. Thank you. We really appreciate your support.
Yeah, cannot say thank you enough.
And without further ado, let's get into the interview.
All right, we want to welcome on to the episode this week as a very special guest. We've got Ben Weitz joining us from Wizards of the Coast. Ben, welcome, and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hey, yeah, I'm really thankful to be on. So yeah, I'm a senior play designer at Wizards of the Coast. I was the limited lead for Tarkir Dragonstorm, and I, put a lot of heart and soul into the set, and was working really hard to try to make limited as fun as it could be, and as Tarkir as it could be. So I'm really stoked to talk about it today.
Well,
I
hopefully you
was
didn't
just
listen to our first episode of the format because I had a rough first
Oh,
week in this format. I was not happy,
oh,
but
you,
since then it has grown up for me, and I'm a big fan now.
you think I didn't prepare for this by watching all of the previous episodes about Tarkir? I actually didn't watch all of them, but I watched a few of them.
I also was scrolling through your Blue Sky account and going through all of your card design evals, and it got me really excited to get to sort of dive deeper and pick your brain a bit more on the design process. And I think my first question is like, okay, so Wizards of the Coast is returning to one of the most beloved limited environments of all time, and you're going to be lead design on it. How does that feel? Are you excited? Are you nervous? Do you have a relationship to Cons of Tarkir prior to this? And if so, what was it? Like,
Yeah, so that was awesome. So we have a bit of an ability to choose which sets we work on at Wizards of the Coast. It's not like 100%, but people work better on sets that they identify with more. So we try to make sure that people are happy working on the sets that they want to. And I tried to get on Tarkir because Cons of Tarkir was actually my first pro tour, and
oh,
so it has a very special place in my heart, and I think that limited environment was like one of my favorites of all time. I've got like triple cons, Eldritch Moon, and like MH1 are like two of my or three of my favorite formats of all time. So I was really excited to work on the return to cons, and yeah, I just really wanted to deliver on feeling like Cons of Tarkir once again. And so, like, three color sets are sort of notoriously difficult. Also, Streets of New Capenna was the most recent one we did, and the limited environment there wasn't one of the greatest of all time or anything like that. So there's also like a challenge at play here, and I sort of like a challenge. And I got to work with Adam Prosak, who is the set lead, who I love working with also. So yeah, I was really pumped to work on the set.
And so, is this the first time that you've been the lead limited designer? Or has that happened before?
It is not the first time. So the first time for a main set release was the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and I also was the set lead for Pioneer Masters,
oh, cool.
which was like a much smaller thing. It was mostly just me, as opposed to like the full sets, which have a bunch of people working on them all the time. And also, Pioneer Masters, as an all reprint set, has like a million extra constraints. Like, you can't make new cards, which it turns out makes it a lot easier to adjust the limited format when you can make any card you want.
Well, so that brings me to a bigger picture question that I have. So you're the lead limited designer, and Adam Prosak's the set lead. Like, how do you figure out how many slots? Are there dedicated slots for, like, okay, you get to design 70 cards for limited, or like, we know we want these commons or uncommons for constructed? How do you figure out which cards are yours, or is it more fluid and dynamic than that?
It's a lot more fluid and dynamic than that. Also, there's like a whole team of people who are on the set team who are like designing cards, and then in the later stages of the format, the play design team is also like adjusting and helping to design cards. So it's like, not that certain slots are flagged for each of us. It's more just what each of us owns, I guess, in the release of the set. So for me, it means I have final call on limited questions. So mostly that means commons and uncommons, though some uncommons will have dual goals in both limited and constructed. So then limited and constructed will reach a compromise or something on cards like that. And Adam is the one who's ultimately responsible for the overall design of the set. So if he really didn't like something that I was doing, I think he probably would be able to overrule me. But we didn't have like an adversarial relationship. We work together, and we try to, because he also wants limited to be as good as it can be. He wants the set to be as great as it can be. So we are working together to solve the problems as they come up. But since I am like on the play design team and have more limited expertise, he relies on me for making the final calls for limited, basically.
So how does it get rolling? Like, because you start with 0 cards, right? Like what can you take us behind the scenes at all? I'm so curious because I love Magic unabashedly, and this is the first time I've ever had to talk to someone from Wizards. This is great.
Yeah, so that question is a very complicated and long question, which could take like a whole podcast of multiple episodes or whatever to answer. I know Mark Rosewater has written at length about design, and you can refer to a lot of his. I would recommend any listeners interested in this question to read a lot of what he's written. I can try to give you like a Cliff Notes overview, basically, which will still probably take a decent amount of time. So design is broken up into several different stages. The stages where limited, I would say, is most important are vision design, set design, and play design. Those are the three arcs in a limited sets journey. During vision design, they start with a literal file of 0 cards, but they aren't working on like a refine. They're not. What they're working on is they're developing mechanics often, and they're trying to set the tone of the set and sort of like, what is the set going to be about? How are we going to make players feel when we're playing the set? Like, what are some of the mechanics that we can design? Like, what is a really cool mechanic that we can come up with that people will get people really excited about the set, for example? So like very, very top level questions like that. And so for example, for Cons of Tarkir, I don't have that much visibility. I don't recall that much about vision design. I tend to work on the later stages of design, but I believe Tarkir vision design was like pretty straightforward. They were like, okay, we're going to make a set and it's going to be about dragons and it's going to be about clans. And so it's going to be a faction set, which means, there's 5 different factions and there's a bunch of cards that are associated with that faction. And usually each faction gets a keyword or ability word or whatever. And so they were working on what should those keywords and ability words be for each clan, and also how many dragons are we going to put in the set. But I think it was mostly straightforward. Like, these are the 2 pillars, and everyone agreed that those were awesome pillars, and the vision design sort of reflected that. But the actual card file that the vision design team works on are not like refined commons. They're not curved out. They're not, they don't always form coherent decks. Vision design will often have the archetype, color, pair themes, but they will frequently change and often not work, really.
So black-green graveyard stuff doesn't always hit?
No, not always. But black-green graveyard is good old reliable. If you're ever struggling on a black-green color pair, it's nice to just, you know what? Those colors play to their strengths. Mid-range removal spells, big creatures, that sort of thing. Once we move from vision design into set design, that's when the set becomes more like coherent as a limited environment. Like, we start trying to fit things together and make color pairs like overlap pleasingly. So we like design cards that will work in the color pair themes and try to work in multiple color pair themes. We will use the mechanics to make those cards. We will figure out if there are any color pairs that are not working and we need to change them. That will often happen. When vision design concludes, they usually give us more stuff than we need. So they make a bunch of mechanics and sort of let us pick which ones are going to work best in the set or which ones will overlap the best with each other. And so set design is sort of where I have the most experience. So set design and play design is where I work the most on these sorts of sets. And over the course of set design is when we start taking like an unrefined file it's full of cards, but those cards are now put into curves, and we make sure that the archetypes have the right, like each archetype has enough 2-drops and each archetype has enough 4-drops and so on. And we make sure that the removal spells are all properly balanced and this sort of thing. So this is when the real bones of limited design is created.
Can I interrupt and ask a question on that? So on limited resources, they've talked quite a bit, or like hypothesized quite a bit about it being kind of formulaic for limited. Like, you're going to have a 2 damage red burn spell, but that maybe has a twist on it for the set. Or, there's going to be a 4 to 5 mana black kill anything spell that maybe has a twist on it for the set. Is it that formulaic in your mind, or kind of can you dial into that process a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's some truth to that for sure. The really fascinating thing about limited is how very small changes to individual cards can create very large changes in how the formats play and how the formats feel. So it's very important to us that different limited formats play differently. We want the experience to be different so that people don't get bored, right? If every set plays the same, it's very easy to just be like, "Okay, I did this 100 times already. What am I doing here?" But it's fascinating how these very small changes, and even just like putting a mechanic on a removal spell, can often change how the game is played. There definitely are like templates of cards that we use, but there's more templates than we have space in the file. So like which templates we end up using and in what combination can really affect uh, sort of how the game feels. But yeah, like removal spell plus set mechanic is like a pretty common design that we go to a lot. Exactly how much mana that costs matters a lot and makes it different. So like in this set, you have Dragon's Prey, right? Which is the 3 mana destroy target creature, and it costs two additional mana if you target a dragon. It doesn't really have a set mechanic on it, but it sort of supports this overall set theme of dragons and the difference between how efficient it is to kill small creatures and how inefficient it is to kill dragons will be very different from a removal spell in what was the last format? Aether Drift, which I guess is just murder, but can also kill vehicles. Having that texture changes a lot.
So I'm going to jump to a question we have much later in our doc that I think is really interesting right now. So two kind of card archetypes that aren't in this format are a Mind Rot variant and a Threaten variant that I think could have potentially huge rippling changes for how the format plays out. Was that a purposeful omission on your part? Did you try them, and did they do things to the environment that you didn't want?
Yeah, those were purposeful omissions. I don't think we ever even. Oh, maybe there was Mind Rot for a little while. Anyway, they are very intentionally omitted because the one of the like goals of the format was to make sure that large creatures, particularly dragons, could shine. Right? We want it's Dragons of Tarkir, or it's not Dragons of Tarkir, but it's Dragonstorm, Tarkir Dragonstorm. We want there to be dragons. We want you to feel like those are the cards that really matter in the set. And so it turns out that in order to cast dragons, you need to play a lot of lands because they're expensive. So Mind Rot as a card just reduces the overall number of resources in the game and makes it harder to cast expensive spells. So we intentionally omitted Mind Rot from common in order to not work counter to our goals, basically. And the common discard spell is aggressive negotiations. It's a coercion, so you like look at their hand and you choose a card. Uh, we felt also we sort of two birds one stoned it because we wanted that effect at common because we knew that Tarkir had a lot of really powerful rares, and one of the best ways to interact with rares is before they are cast. So we felt that having that at common would improve the gameplay as well.
Yeah, big aggressive negotiations fan. That card has gone skyrocketed in my pick order the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
The reason we didn't like active treason is again because we wanted to foster an environment of dragons, and we were concerned that if you play your awesome dragon and your opponent active treasons it and kills you with it, that experience would lead to people being very sad and not wanting to play dragons. So, despite me personally being a huge Active Treason fan, I just sort of love picking your spot, and I think Active Treason is a lot of picking your spot in order to deal a lot of damage. Despite how much I personally enjoy that card type, we thought it was best to not include in this set.
Just for folks who are listening who don't know, you're the red color pie counselor. Is that the right nomenclature?
Yeah, I was. I'm now white,
Oh,
sadly, but because we rotate around. And actually, I had been red for probably longer than I should have been. But yes, I spent a lot of time as the red color pie counselor, and red is my favorite color. I have a mono red cube that I'm really proud of, and yeah, I just generally sort of for me like the fundamental question of Magic that's so fun is should I lightning strike their creature or should I lightning strike their face? And the fact that that question has different answers depending on a whole bunch of context of the game is one thing that I like super love about Magic.
Okay, so that takes me to another question. Like back to Tarkir Dragonstorm, like I think the community narrative broadly, or at least from what we've seen, is it's pretty easy to big picture characterize the format as like Camp Mardu or Camp Teamer. And there's not a lot of consensus, which has been pretty unusual. If you had to pick which camp you're in, are you Camp Mardu after that answer?
Yeah, Mardu is my favorite clan. I really enjoy being aggressive, and Mobilize in particular has some like A plus B gameplay that I really enjoy, where the Mobilize cards are very strong, but if you only have Mobilize cards, you tend not to be able to win that many games because they're a little understated to account for the fact that they produce these tokens. So it's a lot more of a synergy aggressive deck, in my experience, where you need to combine Mobilize cards with the cards that pay you off for having tokens or pump spells and stuff like that. And that's the sort of gameplay that I really like. I talked a little bit about Pioneer Masters earlier. Heroic is also a style of strategy that I enjoy quite a bit. And I built a lot of the Pioneer Master set around Heroic, as the two of you probably recall. Uh, so yeah, that sort of A plus B aggressive synergy game plan I find a lot more fun and interesting than just like playing large creatures, or like I guess Celebration is a good counter thing where like in Wilds of Eldraine, the play two non-land permanents is like not super synergy based. It's just like, oh, my aggressive deck is doing that anyway. I'll simply play two
Right.
permanents. And my permanents will be big then. That stuff appeals to me less, basically.
Gotcha. I wanted to go back to the discussion of this being a faction set, and you referenced Streets of New Capenna, which in my memory, and I think even in practice, like it did feel quite divided. Of like, there's like, you remember the Bant deck, you remember Inspired Overseer, you remember maybe Naya not working out, Calibretti not working out too well, whatever. When I think about Tarkir Dragonstorm, I don't think about it as Abzan and Mardu. And I mean, we do sort of talk about it in these broad umbrellas of Camp Temur, Camp Mardu, which is really, I think, even two broader poles of there's Boros aggro and there is 5-color dragon soup. And then there's like a lot of stuff in between that might be right to draft 1 or 2 times a format, depending on what's open for your seat. Like yesterday, I did a draft where I pack one, pick one, Herd Heirloom, the rare that cares about 4-power creatures. Then I got the Temur Battle Crier that reduces stuff based on your stuff having 4 power. And I was like, oh, I get to draft Gruul now. And I just drafted a bunch of 3-mana 4/2s and Wild Rides. And it was awesome. But like, that's not really right to do, air quotes, more than a couple times probably in the lifetime of the format. But my broader point is, this doesn't quite feel like a faction set to me. I mean, it's there, they're pillars, and you can go full Abzan or full Temur based on the cards. But the format continues to have layers that we peel back week after week of like, oh, this seems to be something you can do, and now this seems to be something you can do, with these two very extreme poles of Boros aggro and 5-color soup. Was all of that like, I'm curious how much of that is purposeful and how much of that is we lay a good groundwork and then some surprises emerge after we release the set?
I think it's more the latter than the former, but I guess I'll say that probably the things you're encountering as you peel off were intentionally put there as clan decks, and it's just that you're engaging with them through this lens of like, if you don't do one of the two things you're trying to do, what you're falling back on something which was intentionally put there. When the format finishes playtesting, I don't know what we don't know what the strongest things are going to be for certain. We don't have that level of confidence, especially because we never playtest the format as it will exist in the real world. We're making changes right up to the wire, right up to the last playtest draft. We're making changes. So I don't ever know for certain what is going to be the strongest. I was pretty confident that 4 and 5-color soup would be a strong thing to do. In Tarkir, I was just, the rares are so strong that being able to play 2 clans worth of rares if you're 4 colors thought would be a very strong thing to do. But I don't know for certain what is going to be the strongest, but the things that are left, like we put more than 2 clans worth of material in the set, right? So I expect that Champion of Doosan is, I assume, a card that you're talking about in this Gruul deck.
Yeah.
That is a card that internally we thought was one of the stronger green commons. Well, we thought like the green-black beatdown deck, the counters aggro deck was stronger than it turned out to be in the real world, for example. And so, what you're discovering is stuff that we did put there. We wanted Champion of Doosan to be an aggressive card, and we wanted there to be green aggressive decks. It's just a little different than we intended it, I guess.
So it sounds like you do think about the strength of the cards in the colors and the color pairs as you're designing. Like, how are you trying to tweak those dot? Like, is your goal to make it balanced as a thing, or is your goal just to make it fun? Like, how are you tracking what's good, what's not, and the power level of the cards?
Yeah, so I guess this points me to the fact that I never did tell you what play design was about when I was telling you about the 3 stages of design. But play design is about the balance and the exact power level of the cards. Set design is about laying the skeleton and making sure everything fits together properly. And then play design, I guess, is about making sure your bones are the right size. So making sure your femur isn't like way bigger than your tibula. God, I don't know biology. I'm really hoping I got those right. But yeah, so we do think about this a lot in play design. We care a lot about color balance, mostly because we want the format to be replayable. So, we have certain pillars of design. We really want the format to be fun. We really want the format to be inviting, so people can, draft for the first time and not feel totally overwhelmed. And we really want the format to be replayable. And then the last one is exciting, but dragons are exciting, so that wasn't too hard. But in order to get value out of your 50th draft, we know that there are a lot of people who engage with limited a lot, like the two of you. And we need there to be excitement for people doing their 50th, 75th draft of each set. So we want to try to make sure that the colors are balanced, so that you have a lot of different stuff that you can do.
So I have so many questions for you. So overarchingly, I think one of the easiest ones to start with is, do you feel like you met your goals? Like, so you worked so hard on this thing and you had a picture in your head of what you wanted, the dragons, the late game stuff, and dragons mattering. When you look at how the limited environment has played out in practice, are you like, yeah, that's what I saw in my head? Or are you like, well, we were pretty close, like, to what I saw in my head, but there's some things I didn't expect, that sort of thing? Like, can you answer how it has played out in practice from what you've seen versus what your goals were in design?
Yeah. So the goals of design were, one, that 3-color decks matter. So, mana is notoriously inconsistent in Magic the Gathering, and 2-color decks in typical formats are just vastly superior to draft to 3-color decks if you can get away with it. Like, in normal sets, it's very easy to just draft 2-color decks, and you should almost never splash, is mostly how the math works out, right? And we wanted to subvert that, and we wanted to make sure that people could draft 3-color decks and feel good about drafting 3-color decks and be paid off for playing 3-color cards. I think this goal has been satisfied. Like, I think that this goal was definitely achieved. People play a lot of 4 and 5-color soup decks. That's, I think, somewhat of an inevitable extension of just including enough mana fixing to play 3-color decks. Like, once you're playing a 3-color deck, it sort of doesn't cost you that much to add a 4th color. But people really do talk about the deck colors, and they draft the 3-color decks, and like 2-color decks are not necessarily the best thing to do. I know that Boros Aggro is like one of the stronger decks, but it's not that only drafting 2 colors is the best thing to do. And yeah, I think we've mostly succeeded at this goal. People are excited to play the 3-color cards. Okay, the second goal was that dragons be cool and strong, and we wanted people to play with the dragons. This, I think we've achieved like miles ahead, better than my wildest dreams.
So to that point, like, did you know, like, Dragonstorm Globe, did you know that card was going to be as central to the dragons deck with the dragons and the Dragonstorms? Because that was not obvious to me at all, even a week or two into playing the format.
I'll go with yes. Yes, to the extent that we can have confidence in anything. We internally thought the Dragonstorm Globe was pretty strong, but I also felt that it was a good place to put power. So, like, a lot of like leading limited design is about deciding which cards you want to be strong and which cards you want to be kind of mid or okay. And Dragonstorm Globe is a card that, when playtesters come back and they say, hey, like this card is actually really strong, it's like maybe one of our strongest manoliths that we've ever made, my response is like, I think I'm okay with that. I think that's good for us. So yeah, we knew that it was a strong card in the Dragons deck. We do not know things like the 5-color Dragons deck is going to be one of the strongest decks. Like that's not the level of confidence that we can have with stuff. But yeah, watching the evolution of people's opinions on that card over time is extremely funny to me, because I just, I was just like, I think this card is really strong. I'm curious to see how people review it, and people mostly pan it, and then it's like they get to play with it and they're like, oh, actually this card is really strong, and I was like, I knew it, I told you.
So is it, did you know it was strong before playing with it, or did you have to play with
Oh,
it
no,
to
no, no. We have
see
to
the
play.
strength?
No,
Because
no, no.
on face value, it looks very like every other manolith that's been printed that's been kind of ho-hum in most formats.
Yeah, we for sure had to play with it, and also for a long time it was choose a color instead of tap for any
Oh.
color. So it was a lot weaker when it was that. But yeah, it's with Magic cards, you can usually eyeball it like 35% of the time if you're as invested as the play design team. And then other than that, it's really like you got to play with the cards. This is my opinion. Other people have different opinions, but in my opinion, it's really hard to know the power level of stuff before you play with the cards. And for limited, like just the way the format works together affects so much. Like, if the dragons are a little weaker on their faces, maybe Dragonstorm Globe is a weaker card, right? Like that is a function of so much else that's happening in the format.
Was designing the omens, like the storm broods and omen as a mechanic, was that pretty clear early on? Like if dragons have to matter, we have to have a buyout for them. Like how did that come about?
Yeah, so that was something that came out of Vision Design. Eric Lauer, I believe, who was the Vision lead, was very convinced that if we are going, because Eric and Adam also worked on Dragons of Tarkir together. So way back when we tried before to make a dragon set, it didn't they didn't really consider it like a great limited, like there weren't like enough dragons in Dragons of Tarkir, they felt, so they wanted to do even more dragons, and they really felt that like if we're going to get people to put this many expensive cards in their deck, we got to give them a buyout. Like there has to be some way to help you hit your land drops, some way to justify being able to play all of these expensive cards in your deck. So basically ever since I started working on the set, the dragons had some sort of buyout. The form of that buyout changed a bit over time until we got to the final omen that currently exists. But I do feel that was necessary and did its job really well. Like people are happy to play Dirger Island Dragon, the blue omen, the blue common omen dragon, just because you can buy it out cheaply, you can flurry with it decently well. If you have the globe coming down as a 5/5 ward 2 is just great stats. I'm personally really happy with how Omen plays out, despite it has some logistical issues. It's not a perfect mechanic, but it does its job.
Is the amount of cycles, we're talking about the storm broods, or I mean, it's hard to think about the dragons without thinking about the exhales and the faction clan nature of the format. There are so many cycles of cards. There's the two-brid commons, the two-brid uncommons. As those become categories you have to design for, is that an enjoyable thing of like, ooh, how do we get stuff into this structure? Or is that structure kind of limiting for you?
Restrictions breed creativity, right?
Good
Isn't that the Mark
question.
Rosewater saying?
Yeah, sure.
Good question. I would guess there's a bit of a love-hate relationship there, where sometimes sometimes the restrictions breed creativity thing really holds true. And it's like, oh, how do I make the perfect piece here while still subject to these constraints? Because there's actually the two-brid cards in particular have a bunch of extra constraints that you don't even know about, because we only thought about them internally. Like Adam was very forward with saying that the two-brid cards should not overly snowball, because hitting your exact 3-color mana on turn 3 is sort of random, and doesn't happen every game. And you shouldn't feel extremely under the gun very fast if your opponent plays their common 3-color card on turn 3. So like none of them have attack triggers. None of them have any like whenever you blank stuff going on. They're all just kind of, you play them, they're kind of vanilla, but they're big and good, is basically what the goal was for those cards. So like those cards, had even more constraints. But filling out the cycles often can be difficult when you get to the 5th one, where you're just sort of like, dang, I used all my good ideas on the first 4, and now it's a lot harder. So it can be fun. It can also be frustrating, especially if you're trying to like solve a particular problem and you can't figure out how. I have a good design story relevant to this. So at the very start of set design, the common omen dragons were all 3 colors. So there were 3, they were our 3-color common. Well, actually, we also had the 2-bird cards. So, but like we want there to be 3-color cards at common because it wants to feel like a 3-color set. So the 3-color dragons were at common, but they had a monocolor omen. So they had the buyout if you were stuck on mana, or you could play the expensive dragon. The problem we had was that they were too hard to differentiate from each other. Like there's only so much you can do at common, text-wise, especially on an omen card, which has less text space, and stat-wise. So like we made the cards, but they just all felt the same. They just felt like 2-mana draw card or 6-mana 4/4 flyer or 5/4 flyer. It was very hard to get that 3-color identity onto the card when it had an omen. So we moved the common dragons to monocolor omens, and we moved the 3-color dragons up to uncommon. And those became that cycle of dragon where we had, because they didn't have omens, we had a lot more space to express their 3-colorness. And the 3-color dragons are actually my favorite cycle in the whole set. I love those cards so much. And you might be able to tell, but when I talked about picking which cards to make strong, those are the cards that we were like, yeah, these cards want to be strong because those are the 2 pillars of the design. Those are 3 colors and they're dragons.
Yeah.
Like, we want these. I want someone to be happy to first pick these cards.
And we are. Sonic Shrieker, Karakit Guardian, those are some of the best uncommons in the set.
I kept expecting someone to tell me to nerf Sonic Shrieker. Like Sonic Shrieker, every time I read that card, I'm just like, wow, this card is messed up.
That's how I feel when it's cast against me too.
So we sort of derailed you here. You were talking about like the design goals for the format, and did you check the box on them? So we hit dragons, yes, and we hit 3-colored, yes. Were there other big picture design goals?
Yeah, so I would say, we have the sort of standard goals, which is that we want this format to be fun and we want the format to be replayable and that sort of thing. Those I think we have also succeeded on, I would claim, I guess. I don't know how many drafts you've done of Tarkir, but I've done a lot of them. So it feels kind of replayable to me. And I think the dragons and the 3-color one are more important, honestly. I would, if I had to choose, I would sacrifice some amount of color balance for them. I would not sacrifice. I think color balance is important enough that I wouldn't go too far. Like, I don't want there to be an unplayable color or anything like that. But in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it's not something shared between every limited lead or whatever. In my opinion, color balance does not need to be perfect for the format to be fun. And it's okay if there's a weaker color as long as it's not so weak that you would never draft it.
I agree. I also feel like the reverse is almost worst. When there's like the clear best thing is almost worse than there's something that's so bad, when it's like something that's so out of whack. And one of the extremely cool things about creating content for this set and for engaging with our community in Discord is that I can't remember a set where there's no consensus, where there truly is people who are like, all I draft is Mardu and I haven't touched the other stuff. And there's people who's like, all I draft is dragons and garbage and I haven't touched aggro. And they just like, they both are having success. And I can't really think of a format where that was true. It's very often like, well, clearly this is the best thing to do, but I prefer doing this. People are like, no, I truly believe that I'm in the right camp, you know?
Yeah, I don't often get too much into the weeds of the like extreme win rate optimized view on limited. Like I when I was on the Pro Tour, I would do that. But nowadays, like I find it more important that the first 5 drafts of a set be a varied experience. The thing I really want to evoke is that you sit down and you do a draft and you play against a deck and they do something really cool and beat you. Like they play a Dragonstorm Globe and like a Dragonstorm and play a dragon and pick them up, and like you're just drafted, Sultai faction cards or whatever. You're just doing your Sultai thing and they do the dragon thing. You're like, holy cow, that's really cool. I want to draft that. That's the sort of like feeling that I want, that is best to evoke in limited, I think. And so for me, the like first 5 or 10 drafts are like the most important. And then once we get into the like hyper optimized for win rate stuff, that is something that's not as, I don't know. It's important that things be replayable in the long term, but I also sort of think the discourse around hyper optimization for limited these days is a little too binary. Like it's a little too much like, oh, this deck has like a 3% less win rate than the other decks on average. It's undraftable. And it's
Amen.
You're on the right show. You're on the right show, sir.
Come on, just sometimes you get past a rare. Just take the rare. It'll be fine. I promise.
Amen. So I feel like this. Speaking of all of that stuff, the first 5 to 10 drafts being really important. I just got shellacked. Like my first 15, 20 drafts, just hammered over and over and over because this format is very different than
you
a
weren't
lot
following
of
directions.
What was that?
You weren't following directions.
You're correct. I was not. Like I was losing. I was losing to Dragonstorm Globe and dragons, and I was like, man,
but
my
instead
opponent's
of
curves
saying,
are terrible, and I just keep losing. Like I was missing the gene of like, oh, that's cool. I should do that. Like that didn't enter my. Didn't
I'm
enter my
always
thought
telling
process.
you is like you're not going, oh, that's pretty cool. You're like, you got lucky. Your mana's terrible.
Yeah. I was definitely missing that for sure. But I almost feel like the format rewards a more intimate knowledge of the format than it does like we'll come in, unless you come in and like, oh, dragons cool, I'm gonna draft dragons, then it does. But if you're a spiky limited person, like you want to this, like the curves of good decks in this format can look really weird or something compared to your typical limited deck. So personally, I feel much better 40, 50 drafts in than I did my first 10 or 20. What was that intentional? How do you seed depth, like the depth of the format into the design process? Is that you say you've alluded to you're trying to do it, but you value the first 5 to 10 more. I almost feel like this format, at least for me, through my experience, has hit on the like draft 50 or 60 is much better than draft 5 or 10 for me personally.
Yeah, I would say that part of that is probably coming from the 3-color nature of the format. I think 3-color sets are just much harder to draft in general than the average set because suddenly every deck has this A plus B component of when do I draft fixing? And sort of learning when you draft fixing is itself a very important and difficult thing to suss out from like just the card file. You sort of just have to play a bunch of games in order to get that. So I think some of that experience is just coming from that. The question of like how we seed like long-term depth is a tricky one. We try our best to include sort of, we call them sideways build arounds into the sets. So you can think of Aether Siphon from DFT as trying to be one of those, or in this set, I would say Dragonstorm Forecaster is trying to be one of those, but sometimes they just end up sort of getting co-opted by whatever the best deck is, I would say, which is sort of what has happened with Dragonstorm Forecaster. When we made that card, we certainly did not think to ourselves, surely people will be posting decks with 4 Boulderborn dragons in them, and those decks will do very well. It was more like this is sort of a fun thing that you can do if you like to do something off the beaten path. It turns out that it's in this set, it's more on the beaten path. So basically I'm saying our job is impossible and then no one can ever possibly do it. But those are some of the ways that we try to seed those sorts of long-term weirdness happening. As far as like figuring out what you're supposed to do, ideally we would like that to be more obvious so that people can do what they're supposed to do early on in the format. So that's why we invented things like 2-color signposts, right? That are sort of telling you, hey, this is what your color pair is doing. so that less experienced drafters can latch onto that and follow directions, basically, and do reasonably well. Once you're trying to get a really high win rate, then things are mostly up to the variance in the format development, and so it can be a lot harder to predict.
So, one of the things that I feel like is so unique or so tough about this format is the signal reading because of the 3-color nature, because 4 or 5 color dragons ended up being such a pillar of the format. It's often tough to figure out in the draft. Am I supposed to be trying to draft 4 or 5 color dragons? Like, I don't know. Maybe the 2 people to my right are doing that, but it's unclear. Like, I got a couple good first picks, and then I don't see dragons, but maybe the packs just didn't have dragons. I feel like this format, more than a lot of recent formats, it's tough to read signals as a drafter. Is that something you designed? Is that something that just happened? Can you speak to that at all?
Yeah, I would say that's another sort of consequence of being a 3-color, 4-color environment. It just becomes harder to understand what the person to your right is doing when the person to your right can be in as many as 3 colors, and is taking your commons. The 3-color cards can help to some degree, but I would say that this phenomenon is not intentional by any means, but it is something that we thought about and we tried to address in design. So yeah, I think it's more of a when you start at the bones of a 3-color set, you're like, I want to make a 3-color set. You know there are going to be issues with that. There's going to be mana fixing issues. There's going to be these signaling issues, and you design cards to try to address those things. But they are always going to be problems, and they are always going to exist to some degree. And the goal for us is to try to mitigate it, to try to mitigate the downsides of the overall themes, so that people can still revel in the upsides, I guess.
For sure. And you'd mentioned knowing when to pick lands as well. Like, for me, over the course of the format, lands have plummeted in my pick order. I think I was way too high on the lands at the beginning. Is that something that you guys had experienced during the play design process because you wanted the 3-color decks to be so have better mana and be accessible?
Yeah, I mean, the weird thing about us is like the cards change all the time. So actually, the amount of mana fixing in the set steadily increased over time. We already started at kind of a lot, I would say, but like I said earlier, like we were very confident that we need a lot of mana fixing for a 3-color environment to work. So the monuments were originally a lot weaker than they are right now. They were like Wanderer's Twigs, Wanderer's Twig variants. So they like cost 1 to play and then 1 to sack, and then you could go get the land. And then they had their spell effect attached to them or whatever. So you had to choose between the land and the effect. And we were like, oh, but like people aren't really playing these cards because Wanderer's Twig is kind of a weak card. And we shouldn't make people choose between their mana fixing and their cool output of the monument. So we should just go to a version where you just get the land right away, and then you can get the whatever the output is later on. And like that just improved the amount of mana fixing in the format by a lot, because all of a sudden that's a cycle of cards that people were like basically sideboarding and not playing, into, oh, these cards I'm like very happy to play and actually pick kind of high because they're like pretty strong.
Mm-hmm.
So for us, it's hard to key in exactly on when is the right time to pick lands, because that answer changes over the course of development. But our maxim was always like, okay, we want people to cast their spells, so we're going to like add a lot of mana fixing to the set. The devotees also are a cycle where it's just very clearly like, hey, we want you to put these in your deck. Please put these in your deck so that you can cast your spells. It'll be good. Magic will be fun, I promise. So I'm sort of happy to hear that lands have gone down for you in your pick order over time, because that sort of means that there actually is enough mana fixing in the format for people to properly play 3-color decks. And it makes it easier on players who don't know that you're supposed to, in original Cons of Tarkir, picking lands really high was like a normal thing to do. And if you're a new player, picking lands is like not very exciting, So it's good that there's enough mana fixing that it can go around and everyone can sort of get it without feeling too stressed.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, is I think we also had lands high in our pick order as a a sort of hangover from Khans of Tarkir of like, well, I know that was a thing to do,
Yeah.
so it's probably a thing to do here, and it just doesn't quite work the same way, which I think is very cool.
I'm still on team first pick Trilands. I'm not passing a Triland unless there's a nice rare, really good uncommon in the pack. But the common lands, I'll get them eventually.
Yeah. Were there, I mean, you talked about feeling like, all right, so I feel like someone's going to tell me that I need to nerf Sonic Shrieker in some way. Were there any surprises to you, or have there been some big surprises in terms of individual cards of like, man, I really thought this thing was going to play out a certain way and it hasn't? Or, man, I really thought this card was like just okay and it's really overperforming.
I would say internally, we thought the black green counters deck would be a little stronger than it turned out in the real world. We felt like that was an aggressive deck that could place like some disruptive elements, like you would get good removal and like aggressive negotiations. I don't know. I thought aggressive negotiations was really strong internally. It seems like it's been kind of mid in the real world, but also Ben just
that
told
card's
me that
great.
he's a
That card's
fan.
great.
So
Stocks up.
If you're playing
sure.
black, that card's the truth. I love
Yeah.
aggressive negotiations.
Mardu Devotee was a very controversial card internally, I would say. And it turned out to be very controversial in the real world, at least in the beginning as well, which was very fun for me to watch. But yeah, some people were like, this card is really strong. Like, should it be Scry 1 instead of Scry 2? Other people were like, I'm never going to put this card in my deck. Like, why would I play this card? Please make it a 2-mana card. And that was just it was very funny to see what we went through internally mirrored in the real world. And keep in mind, when we released it, I was like, I don't know. I think it's strong. Maybe like I want all the devotees to be strong, so I wouldn't have shipped it if I didn't think it was strong. But I didn't know for certain, and there was a lot of conflicting feedback. So it was fun to sort of watch that arc play out. I think we had a pretty good handle on the format, to be totally honest, when we finished. Like we knew, I mean, I knew that 4 and 5 color dragons were likely to be strong because, well, I knew 4 and 5 color soup decks were likely to be strong just because of the rares and whatnot. I was unsure whether or not like the actual dragon build arounds were going to be strong enough for people to play that as like a strong deck as opposed to like a deck a sideways sort of deck. But the Dragonstorms ended up strong enough, and I love the Dragonstorms too. I could talk for 20 minutes about how much I love those cards.
Please do. We want to hear it.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh man, let me tell you a little bit of history of the set then. So we want dragons to be cool. Obviously, I've said it so many times on this podcast already. In order for that to happen, we need cards that care about dragons in some way. And like our typical design is often creatures that will get better if you cast a dragon or if you control a dragon, right? So like the very typical design is I get a +1/+1 counter whenever you cast a dragon or whatever. The problem we felt going in design was that even if we bribe you and even if you pack your deck full of dragons, they still cost 5 and 6 mana, and you're still probably only playing 4 to 6 of them or whatever. You're just not going to cast a dragon that often with a creature in play that cares about if you cast a dragon. It's just, you have to draw the creature, it has to survive, then you have to cast a dragon, and 1/1/1 counter isn't really that cool.
If all that's gone your way, you're probably winning anyway.
Yeah. So then you have to cast another dragon. So it's like, okay, it's not really working out. How else can we figure out ways to make you want to play dragons? The exhales were another thing that we were working on. Those worked really well internally. I expected them to be very strong. I mean, they're just removal spells, right? It's like, what am I going to put in my limited deck? Oh, I'm going to put removal spells in my limited deck.
But they're premium removal.
They're really
spells.
good, and the fact that it's like a cycle where every color, maybe save for the green one, like gets something that's really disruptive from turn 2 to turn 10. They're format like defining cards in my mind.
Yeah, that's fair. In my mind, it was just sort of like as a method to bribe people to play dragons, they're very easy because it's like they're removal spells. Yeah. It's much easier to get people to play removal spells than it is to get people to play creatures in general because they're scarcer or whatever.
Sure.
So it was like, okay, how do we solve this problem of my creature? Like, I just don't actually cast a dragon that often. I want my reward to feel more impactful than a +1/+1 counter. We ended up trying we brainstormed for a long time and we tried like 2 or 3 different things, not all of which I remember what they were, but we ended up on this trial cartouche model, which I'm calling trial cartouche because it's based on the Amonkhet uh, trials that would go back to your hand once you played a cartouche, which were very weak cards, right? They weren't that weak, but like on their face, they're like auras that you don't really want to put in your deck. Sort of similar to expensive creature that you maybe don't want to put in your deck. And the nice problem that these solved was that they're just enchantments. They just sit on the battlefield. Like they're not going to die. I mean, unless your opponent plays Disruptive Stormbrood or whatever, but they typically
They've
don't
already
get
done the
removed.
thing, like they have an ETB, and so like you're just killing a blank piece of cardboard at that point.
Yeah. So like they really frequently don't get removed from the battlefield, which means that they're going to be there and available for when you cast your dragon. And because we can charge mana for them, because like they go back to your hand, so you have to recast them, so you have to pay the mana again. But because they're slow and clunky like that, we can give you some like pretty powerful effects. You can really feel like you're paid off by playing even only one dragon. Like the second time you cast Teeming Dragonstorm, it's like, wow, I have gotten a lot of things from this card. So that when we made that change and we playtested it, the playtesters like basically instantly loved it, just loved it. Like Breaching Dragonstorm was like called out in every playtest. Someone was like, I love this card. It's so cool. Like, nice. And someone was like, I hit a dragon with this. And then it immediately went back to my hand. I'm like, yes, that will happen some amount of the time. Awesome. So yeah, the Dragon Storms were like a really, really cool design solve for kind of a tricky problem in my mind of like how to really reward something that only happens once or twice a game. And I actually I've been trying to think of like, oh, how can I apply these designs to some of the future sets that I've been working on? Like, is there another can I make like a one-off Dragon Storm in a different set that rewards you for a different thing, but not like a cycle of it? Because maybe this is what a sideways build around looks like in a different set. So I've been really happy with those.
That's really cool. Has there been a fundamental or a tangible shift for you? You talked about Lost Caverns of Ixalan being a set you worked on, and that was, I think, the last draft booster set before the addition of play
It was,
boosters.
yeah.
Is play boosters markedly different for you? Are there some knobs you feel like you have to tweak? Is there a tangible shift for how you design for play boosters versus draft boosters?
Yes, definitely. So one of the things that Play Design has been thinking, like as a team, has been thinking a lot about is how design heuristics shift in the wake of the Play Booster change. So we're honestly still learning. We've had what, a year and some change, or is it just a year now? I don't know. Time
Yeah,
has no
a
meaning.
year and 2 sets.
Okay, yeah. Um, and that's when the feedback starts happening, right? Because we're on a really long loop where we work like a year and a half in the future. And so we've just started seeing the impact of Play Booster on the real world. So we're trying to learn from every single set, basically. Okay, like what works, what doesn't, how should we change the way we've designed cards? On the whole, we've made some big changes. Like we've generally made common stronger, I would say, because we know you're going to get more uncommons. We know you're going to get more rares. So we wanted to narrow the gap in power between those different rarities, just so that people can feel like their commons, are important. It's very good if you want to draft those cards and they are a relevant part in your deck, especially because they are the cards that we can make sure you have access to with the most frequency. So if we need to give you a tool, it's easiest to give you that tool at common. Um, and we've also just been trying to increase the amount of removal, or make sure that the removal can hit the rares, because we know there's going to be more of them. So like a good example in this set would be, I guess, Riverwalk Technique. So we added the negate mode to Riverwalk Technique fairly late in the process, because we were just like, oh, we know there's a lot of rares in this set. This has been a thing that people have been kind of giving us feedback about in the real world, just as Play Boosters came out, because I think the timing lines up where like they got released in the real world basically when we were working on Tarkir. And so We were like, okay, let's add this as an additional tool at common. Like blue common already has a pretty strong counterspell, right? Dispelling Exhale is a pretty strong card. So it was like, okay, how do we feel about adding a second, what we perceive as a pretty strong counterspell to the format at common? It's a little risky. It was the full cancel for a little while, but I kind of got
Oh,
cold feet, and I was
wow.
just like, this card does not need to be cancel, and I am a little worried about adding a second strong counterspell. So we pulled it back to negate, and I'm really happy with how that has turned out. By the way, I think playing one copy in your deck is like the perfect number of amount that I want you to play that card, and it's just a nice tool to have for the slower decks to handle rares from the opponent. But so changes like that are sort of the kinds of changes we're trying to make in a play booster world, where I think also a big change is that it used to be that we would be concerned about common finishers, where common finishers, if you lose too many games to the same card, then games can start to feel repetitive. And so we sort of shied away from commons that were like too big, or common like 5-power flying common was like actually 4-power flying common, I think was off limits for like a little while, at least while I worked at Wizards, because we were just concerned about games being boring. Now I think we're not as concerned about that anymore. Like, we just don't think that the games are, even if we give you like a common finisher, it's probably just better for you to have access to that easily than it is to worry about dying to that too often, because I think it's just not really that realistic. Like, I just don't think that's really what happens anymore.
So talking about the different impacts rarities have, I assume you have a lot less control as the limited lead over the power level of the rares for the format. I mean, like Tarkir Dragonstorm has some banger rares and mythics. Like, you don't get to tweak that knob at all. That would be my guess, but I'm curious as to how that works.
No, so rares, are made because we want people to play them in constructed, and we want people to own them, and we want them to be exciting. And I also think that limited, it would be less fun without rares. I think rares do mix things up a lot in limited. Um, just playing against different cards is exciting. They are optimized for other jobs. That said, we are cognizant of cards that are in what we call the bad place, which is cards that are like really, really strong and limited, but like not really reaching their goals for other formats. Um, and when that happens, we usually try to address those cards, uh, either by making them reach their other format goals better, or by changing them in ways that will make them a little bit less powerful and limited.
So I have to ask, what do you have cards in mind that ended up in the bad place for Tarkir Dragonstorm?
Oh, for Tarkir Dragonstorm? Well, it's a bit young. Tarkir is a bit young to
Yeah.
say for sure whether anything is ending up in the bad place or not, because, uh, cards need to have time to prove themselves in various formats, or, whether or not people like them.
I'm
So,
thinking Meringue River Regent personally, or
oh,
is that
is that your
constructed
pick?
playable?
Is that
I
your
think
pick? Because I can promise you that that card is not in the bad place,
okay.
because that card is relevant in standard constructed, and
I'll see. Oh, there you go. I don't pay attention to constructed.
so that card, yeah, you will not get me apologizing for Meringue River Regent. I love Meringue River Regent, and I also, you know what, I love that it's a gigantic blue flyer. I just think that blue has wanted a, see, now my color pie counselor personality is coming out, and I kind of just think it's sad that the best flying creatures have been demons for a while, and I think it's about dang time that blue has a gigantic flying creature. So
Show some respect to Mahamodi Jin.
it's been a while.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about how the format's played out and what you've experienced, what your design goals were, and how you met those. Having seen it all now, like, play out, if you could go back and, like, quote unquote alchemy paper magic cards instantly, like, to where it's just fixed for everyone, there's no complications that like a separate digital paper thing brings, is there anything that you would go back and change about the format? Are you a proud papa, perfect the way it is, wouldn't change a thing, that sort of stuff?
um, Nothing is ever perfect. The way we work is, we work up until our deadline, and we're changing cards up until our deadline. And then when it's time to ship the set, we ship the best set that we've made. and then we work on something else, because you could spend literally infinite time trying to make a Magic set perfect. Uh, so yes, there are things that I would change, with especially with the benefit of hindsight. Now that I've had millions and millions and millions and millions more games of playtesting done for me by a distributed crowd of people, there are things that I would change. Um, I think for a perfect world, I think Mardu is a little bit too strong. I wish the format were like a little bit slower, but I will say that I think it's extremely important that Mardu is strong enough to keep people honest in the format. I think it would be a bit of a disaster if every deck were 4 and 5 color soup all the time, and that you never had to worry about someone killing you. I think the format would be a lot less fun if that were true. Just be more repetitive and slower and kind of boring, honestly. So I really am glad that Mardu is strong, and I'm really glad that it keeps people honest, and I think it helps achieve our goals that way. I wish it were, in a perfect world, a little bit less fast.
Is there something specific that you feel like you could be like, yeah, maybe if we just knocked this down, or maybe this card didn't need to, or
That's a really, really hard question. I certainly would not nerf Shock Brigade. I don't think I would nerf Salt Road Pack Beast either. I'm a big fan of that card. Like, I think nerfs to like the strongest commons is too much of a nerf. Like, that has a big impact as opposed to nerfing like sort of a medium common. But I'm not really sure what it would be, if I'm being totally honest.
yeah, fair.
Which is
maybe it's the cards that help with the going wide, like Sharpshooter or War Effort. Although I love War Effort as a card. That's such a cool design.
I'm a big War Effort believer, or like, it's really important that the Mobilize set have an anthem of some kind. And in testing, we found that like +2/+0 anthem, too much. You kill people way too fast with +2/+0 anthem. We cut Trumpet Blast from common. We cut Trumpet Blast from the entire set, actually.
What was it there for a minute?
Oh yeah. Seize Opportunity was Bottle 2 or Trumpet Blast for quite a while.
That seems broken.
Ooh, what is that?
It was,
what is the shorthand for the red card advantage? What did you call
Bottle
it?
2?
oh,
Bottle 2?
Yeah, sorry, it's after Klein Bottle, or no, not Klein Bottle. That's a math thing. Elkin Bottle. Elkin Bottle.
Bottle 2. I love it. Okay, cool. Yeah, Trumpet Blast would have been miserable.
Yeah, so we figured out that was way too strong. So we removed Trumpet Blast from the entire set. But I do think it's really important that there's some way to buff your tokens, because that's cool. Like, people like doing that. So I love War Effort, actually. I think it's really strong. Don't get me wrong, it's really strong. But I think it's kind of the right level of strong for a build around enchantment that costs 4 mana.
Yeah, it's a very cool card. I wouldn't want to change that. But I'm just talking about what you could, if you don't want to hit the commons, what you could maybe.
Yeah, I don't know. It's really, I would honestly have to like pour over the card file again and like see what very small changes could be made or whatever.
So Mardu weaker, anything else?
Mardu, a little
Big picture clear, stuff?
Just
tiny,
a little.
Tiny bit. I don't want to say like Mardu was a mistake or anything like that. I think Mardu being strong is really good and really important for the format. I think actually, to rephrase it in a little bit, maybe I should say, I wish I could allocate some power from Mardu Go Wide to black-green counters like Go Tall. Because I think that deck ended up a little bit weaker in the real world than we thought it would be internally. And I think that having 2 different aggro decks, one of which is like a Go Tall experience where you put a bunch of counters on one creature and you try to ride that creature to victory, versus the Go Wide experience of Mobilize, like those are 2 very different aggro decks, and that could add some more replayability to the set. So in a perfect world, I would allocate a little bit of power from Mardu to black-green. I would probably buff the black-green gold cards a little bit, would be my guess. I think the 4-mana card could probably just use a little extra juice somewhere. I think dragons is like basically perfect, though. I don't think I would change maybe any dragon. I even love Feral Deathgorger, if I'm being totally honest.
That's the black one, yeah?
The Black Common. Yeah.
Ben, you did too for a long
I
time.
did for a long time. I've since dialed back the love. I was too
Look
high.
at 3/5 Death Touch. It's just it beats all the other dragons. You know, it's just good. If you got a globe, it's a 4/6. I don't
For a
know.
globe, it's
I will say I had a
gigantic.
real feel bad the other day with that Gruul deck I was talking about, where I had a Champion of Doosan and a Wild Ride in my graveyard, and my opponent cast the Black Dragon and went yoink on both of
Love it.
those. I was like, what the heck? How is that fair?
So speaking of Wild Ride, that's a very cool card. Like,
Yeah.
if you're evaluating that as a limited content creator, like you've got to slap like a D on it or something if we're using the LR grading scale. But it's been such a unique part of the format, and when it works, very powerful. Do you have any thoughts about that card? Did you know it was going to be a unique key player in certain archetypes?
So Wild Ride is the kind of card where you have to spend an entire card to get a bunch of tempo or a bunch of temporary advantage, right? Maybe just deal a bunch of damage all at once, but you're sort of down a card. I personally find those cards very interesting. Like I told you earlier, threatens, active treasons, or whatever. I really like those kinds of cards. I love building decks that have plans that are like in somewhat defiance of typical limited heuristics, where I want my cards to be worth a card. I want to get up on card advantage. So Wild Ride is the kind of card that I think can be super cool. It is also very dangerous, where if the format had shaken out a little differently and Wild Ride had been clearly the best thing to do at the start, that would be really bad for the format, because the format wants to be slow. The format wants to be about dragons. So it honestly, like, there were some times when I really thought that we should take it out of the set. There were some times where the team as a whole was a little bit concerned about it. We ended up keeping it in for it was sort of a judgment call. I'm very happy that it was not good in the beginning and people have sort of come up on it, because then it's more of like a secret archetype, like a depth, a peel back layers and depth, like what you were talking about. That is like the perfect landing strip for it. And I'm very happy that that happened. Yeah, that sort of card can work out badly in different situations. So it's like a very interesting card for me, I guess.
So speaking of peeling back layers, is there anything that you seeded into Tarkir Dragonstorm that you're still waiting for the community to peel back? Like, oh
Yeah,
well,
we won't tell anyone, but we'd like to know if there's any secret archetypes left to be discovered.
I don't know about that.
What about cards that have juice that are not talked about enough? Cards that you think have juice. What's your biggest sleeper card?
When you're drafting, what's your biggest how is this still in the pack that you feel like keeps coming up?
It was Champion of Doosan, but I feel like people are kind of catching up on that one.
Yeah.
So, and before Champion of Doosan, it was Dragonstorm Forecaster, but people have caught up on that one too. So I'm not really sure that there are.
What is your ideal Forecaster package? Are you like I guess at this point it's like as many globes as I can in a dragons deck, and then I'll play that, and Boulderborn Dragons sort of if I need more dragons.
Yeah, I would say that my ideal one would be like 2 of each, like 2 Dragonstorm Forecasters, 2 globes, 2 Boulderborn Dragons.
Oh, okay.
I mean, maybe at this point I'm just supposed to say an infinite number of globes. I'm not really sure, but like surely, I wouldn't play 22 globes, so surely
sure, so somewhere between 2 and 22. Yeah.
My very first draft of the format in the real world was like during early access or whatever, and I got a double Dragonstorm Forecaster deck with like Ugin, and I was like so proud of myself. I was like, oh, this deck is so cool. Like, I got to do the Dragonstorm Forecaster thing right at the start of the format, and like, you know, I won a bunch of games with Ugin, but a few times I cast Boulderborn Dragon and exiled something with Ugin, so you know that totally counts as a synergy. It was totally necessary for me to win that game. And then, you know, slowly over time, people are just like, oh, actually, like these cards are just strong cards, and like it's not actually that cool to do a Dragonstorm Forecaster thing. And I was like, dang it. But I still feel like I got my jollies in the very beginning. But yeah, I think I had 2 of each in that deck, and that was awesome.
Nice.
What are you most proud of as the limited designer?
I am most proud of the cycle of Dragonstorms and the cycle of 3-color dragons. I think those are our best work. Just the whole design team figuring out like how to solve that problem with the dragons and like how to make cool dragon storms, because like roiling dragonstorm and encroaching dragonstorm also I think have applications like outside of limited, and that's really cool. And then the 3-color dragons, just making those cards as cool as they could possibly be, making people's eyes like bug out when they see those. That's just sort of the coolest thing for me, and I'm really proud of all the work the team did working on those cards, and making Karakit Guardian just like an awesome. One of my favorite combos in the whole set is Karakit Guardian plus Dragon Claw Strike. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to do this, but it's just you feel all nice and cozy as you're just like, all right, kill your creature, attack you for 12. Good luck. And then just the Mardu one is awesome. The Sultai one is like, I mean, a lot of the power of that card is in the renew, but also it does like really subversive and cool things in other formats. And yeah, for like uncommons, there's a lot of uncommons are the kinds of cards that often have dual goals for both limited and other formats. And while I was the limited lead for this set, I also work a lot on all the other formats, and I worked a lot on the set for constructed as well. So like some of my opinions are bleeding in there. But the Jeskai Dragon, I love the Jeskai Dragon too.
I also love the Jeskai Dragon.
Great. Yeah.
I'm just that's definitely what I'm most proud of for limited, I think.
So is there a favorite deck you've drafted? What's the best deck you've drafted? Is it the early access Ugin Dragonstorm Forecaster, or like the one where you're like, this is awesome?
I want to answer with not a deck that I drafted, but with a deck that I watched one of my coworkers draft. Which maybe you've encountered this at this point because I've seen a few other people do this as well. But it was a Glacierwood Siege Auroral Procession deck. So Glacierwood Siege being the milling enchantment, and then Auroral Procession.
Oh, just looping Auroral
Procession,
buying
Procession back.
Oh, that's filthy. I have not seen that.
Yes, it was extremely cool. And bewildering Blizzard to buy some time and draw some cards, and it was super cool. I was like, Daniel, if you don't trophy with this, I'm going to be so sad.
All right. Anything before this has been incredible? Anything before we go that you want to get out that you wish the world knew about the limited design for Tarkir Dragonstorm, or just design in general?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I want people to know the most about limited design is I really do feel like limited design, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I really think it's about choosing what cards you want to be strong. So you like start at a basis of, this is what I want my limited format to look like, right? I want it to be kind of slow. I want you to cast expensive flying creatures. What cards do I need to be strong to get a world where that is true, right? And if you start from there, then it makes sense. It's not like we don't want every card to be perfectly balanced with each other. We don't want every card to be the exact same power level. That doesn't shape a format. That doesn't make an experience. What we want to pick the cards that we want to be strong to get the experience that we want. So I want the dragons to be strong. I want the mana fixing to be strong. I want the removal to be strong. I want Sibsig Appraiser to be one of the best commons, because Sibsig Appraiser promotes high resource games, right? Like you block with it, you can trade it off with some early aggression, but it can hit you your land drops, it can find you your dragons, stuff like that. I want the Dragon Storms to be strong because they're dragon payoffs, and I want dragons to be strong. I want life gain to be strong, right? I want there to be a lot of life gain in the set so that you can survive early aggression. That's why the green dragon gains life and the white exhale gains life and all these sorts of things. So limited design is really about that sort of planning. And it explains why there are certain, I'll say, imbalances in power level, but like imbalances in power level are a good thing. And that, I think, is lost on people sometimes. And I think it's important that people know that.
One of the things that I found so hard as I was listening to you talk about the design of the set was how intertwined everything is. It's so hard. You start thinking about the cycle of dragons at common and the omens, and then you think about the abundance of mana fixing, and okay, there's the monuments and the devotees, and but there's also the exhales, and they're also, but like they all feel like this perfect interlocking puzzle to me that it's impossible to imagine all of those pieces emerged at the same time, but it's also impossible to imagine how any one piece emerged without the other ones in place already, And that is sort of what feels so mysterious / exciting to get to hear you talk about design for the past hour and a half.
Yeah, that's what set design is for. And it's actually very interesting where sometimes you see how two pieces have grown organically, and then you look back on it and you're like, well, I guess I see how we got here. I probably would have chosen to do something slightly differently in hindsight, but I can't because right now they fit together as best as they can with like relative to all of the rest of the set also. So it's like the journey that brought us here, I see exactly how it happened. And we're at like a local maximum, and that'll have to do.
Well, I cannot say thank you enough. You've been an insanely cool guest. We've not gotten to do an episode like this in 400 some episodes. So this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I had a ton of fun. I love talking about Magic. I love talking about Tarkir. Just a huge fan of Limited in general, and it was just a blast.
Yeah, and thank you for all your work on Magic. I don't know. Both Ethan and I love the game. We're hopeless addicts, and it's awesome.
Oh, I listen to your shows on Pioneer Masters too.
I love Pioneer Masters. Either, yeah, I'll take. Yeah. Don't ignore what I said about Tarkir Dragonstorm in week 1. I was a very salty boy.
Not every set is for every person. It's okay.
True.
That's the beautiful thing about Magic, Well, despite that, I appreciate you taking the time to come chat to us
for sure
today. If people have questions about design, can they reach out to you on Blue Sky or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I won't necessarily answer every question, but I really love talking about Magic. And if you have any questions, I am bsweitz123 .bsky.social. I don't know what the trailing
It's extremely
part of
concise and catchy.
But yeah, I'm always happy to chat.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking the time, and let's wrap it up. Take it away, Ben.
All right, great place to wrap us up. Thank you as always to Salty Pretzels for our intro and outro music. Make sure you give it a listen.
You can find all of our content on our website, lordsoflimited.com. There is links to our episode backlog, our YouTube channel, our Twitch streams, respectively, our tier list for Tarkir Dragonstorm. Get those Dragonstorm globes while they're hot. Any of all that content is available at lordsoflimited.com.
If you've got any feedback about the show or any questions, shoot us an email at lordsoflimited@gmail.com.
Thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Lords of Limited.
Thanks, everybody. See you later.